Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparutade sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta mamunjantu satang. So this afternoon, can you hear me? Now, I think I've left the spot today. Have this opportunity to reflect on Dhamma. So I encourage you all just to be a witness, a listener, and how what you hear affects you is the way it is. Whether you agree, disagree, get confused, doubt, get angry, or whatever, be the witness. And this is an important position in the whole structure of the classical Theravada Buddhism, because the witness position is always the Buddha knowing Dhamma. And so it's like today there's so much interest in consciousness as if it were an object that you can observe. And it's like trying to find consciousness is impossible. It's like looking for yourself when you're here and now. So it's nothing you have to find, but take the position of the witness. It's the way it is that all conditions are impermanent and all Dhamma is not personal. You realize ultimately consciousness is not personal. I can delude myself and make it personal because that's how I was conditioned, culturally conditioned, to think of myself as always in a separate form, separated by the body and by space from others, and that consciousness is in my body, in my brain. And we, in Western civilization, tends to identify consciousness with the brain. So the brain is a sankhara condition, and you can have brain damage and still be conscious. So, like trying to find Dhamma as if it were something other than the way it is, whatever you experience through your senses, through your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, then that is, you're aware of it. You're consciously aware of the feelings you have, the emotions that arise in your consciousness. You're aware of how your body feels when it's feeling well or unwell. But we say it in a very personal way. Everything that happens to the senses we identify as some kind of personal experience. So people are traumatized by life because they see life through the very unstable conditions that we experience through these bodies and through the senses. And contemplating, just in my old age, I have nothing much to do but contemplate Dhamma, so you listen to the news or the media, and you hear of the atrocities, the wars, the starvation, the humiliation, the blatant brutality that goes on. And you wonder, as a person, is it ever going to stop? Can we ever stop this? Or what can I do to make it better? So, taking it very personally then, thinking of what I must do to kind of make the world better. But still, that's a self-view of this, this separate form sitting here can actually make the world better, when the world is basically unstable, unsatisfactory. That's its very nature. When you contemplate Dhamma, you begin to realize, how just sitting in my kuti, looking out at the garden, you watch how nature operates, how the animal world is based on survival. And that's the nature of all animals, to survive and procreate the species. So we have a sexual energy that's a part of the human body that we identify with. So we identify with sexuality, and so sexuality becomes a big issue at this time. And there's various views about it being that it's only right under the most pristine circumstances, or it's wrong, it's basically sinful, it's dirty, one should abstain, and we're a celibate community. So exactly how do you see sexuality as a natural energy that comes through the male or female bodies, and see it, and try to say, is it personal or is it just nature? Did you seek it out or decide to, that this is what you are, a sexual being? Or does sexuality come and go? The urges of that energy aren't always present. They arise and cease like old conditions. Same with survival. Survival is basic. So we need food to eat. We need to have water to drink. We need to have medicines for illness. We need shelters to live under, protect us from the weather. We need clothes to wear, something to cover the body. And so these are survival necessities. So the Buddha, in establishing the Sangha in India, there's a very different climate in India than here in England. 2,565 years ago, that's a long time ago according to the way most of us think. He established the 4 requisites for bhikkhus, for samanas. Rag robes were not supposed to, at that time in India, cloth was very expensive. They had to weave it. They didn't manufacture it. They didn't have industrial machines to produce volumes of cotton or silk or wool. So the textile was very much a thing that was allowed by the Buddha, but the samanas were allowed to pick up the rags that the lay communities discarded. Now that's a pretty low standard of making a robe out of rags. But then later on, lay people began to have such respect for the Sangha that they asked for special permission to give good quality cloth for robe making to the monks and nuns. So that's allowed. But clothes are a necessity for just health reason, for survival. And then medicine for illness. This is, here in England, it's it's very impressive, the National Health Service. It's a free service offered to the population. And this is a requisite. It's not necessary to have medicine, but the basic allowance for samanas is fermented cow's urine, which was some kind of medical substance back in India 2,565 years ago. So that, now modern medicine is, I have the best medical care I could ever expect. So better offerings of more efficient, practical medicines of modern time are allowed. And on like that. The shelter for the night, a fruit of a tree. So notice that these are basic allowances for survival. A root of a tree, rags for a robe, for something to wear, fermented cow's urine for medicine, and then alms food as we go on Vindabad or collecting alms, allowing the lay community to make offerings of food in an alms bowl. So these four requisites are very good to reflect upon, because life in the UK is much more luxurious than it was in India 2,565 years ago. But we can adapt, but then we can also take it for granted. Or some people form views that we should go back to rag robes, pick up the rags. But in England, which was the first country in the world to industrialize, there's Oxfam and there's so much extra cloth available. It's not hard to find, and cloth in England, you can get used clothing, used cloth and so forth in these second-hand shops. They're abundant. They don't know what to do with all the cloth, the clothes that they manufacture. So just reflecting on this, then I encourage the Sangha to reflect on this all the time, not to take luxury for granted, but to always, it gives me a sense of gratitude that I have such nice robes to wear, or food every day, or a shelter for the night. And when we first moved into Chithurst in 1979, we moved into this derelict house. And there was a movement to kind of force us to leave. The house itself was extremely in an extreme state of dereliction. And we had to make do with best we could because half of the house was falling into the cellar below. And then there was a petition going around. Some of the local people wanted to force us to leave, and we had to get permission to change the official use of this property, which was listed as a farm, to become a Buddhist monastery, which West Sussex never had before. So it was all unknown what was going to happen. And Chitta is a very beautiful property. And, the personality really wanted to keep it, didn't want to be kicked out or made to leave or give it up. It was it would make an ideal forest monastery. So every night I'd reflect on, right now there's a roof over my head, and I felt this gratitude that I had a roof over my head for the night, where the personality that I want to keep this, we want to make it into a really nice Buddhist monastery, and all my ideals about monasteries and living in the beautiful hammer wood and on like that. That personality was making a big scene of it, but the reflective ability was a shelter for one night. And I found that very helpful to deal with all the doubts and questions and problems that arose at that time, just learning to not hold on to all my personal wishes and desires, which were good wishes and desires. They weren't selfish. But then contemplating the world, it's, you being an American, being brought up in the United States, you have this strong conditioning about democracy. So now in the mass media you hear about democracy being under threat in the United States. And of course that's very shocking to hear because, being my age, and it's just taken for granted that democracy is going to get better and better. And the United States is the world's leading democratic power, and all the propaganda that you've acquired in your lifetime resonates with this sense that America will always be a democracy. And now you hear the news about democracy under threat. So democracy is an ideal. The United States is a country that didn't really evolve from primitive times. It was landed in the midst of the world as an ideal democracy when it attained independence. So it was born out of the mind, of the brain, the ideal of democracy that will last forever. And so this sense of wanting to find security forever, wanting to find medicines that will keep us young forever, wanting to make the conditioned realm into some kind of ideal realm. Because it can't be. The conditioned realm that we identify with is basically unsatisfactory. It's changing. And you can't really stop that change. Change is the very nature of what we see here, smell, taste, touch, think, and feel. Now these are very important to reflect upon because we would like a kind of ideal world government, where all the countries of the world cooperate and support each other for providing stability and security in a fair and democratic system. So that's a beautiful ideal, but an ideal is a sankhara. It's not. It's like something far away, something that is beautiful, but you can't hold on to it. Or if you do hold on to it, then you become embittered or cynical in life because what you were conditioned with in childhood doesn't work out, doesn't come to be true. It changes. So this is reflective on the way it is, reflection on the way it is. Beginning to just contemplate, look at the world around us, what we hear, what we smell, taste, touch, what we see, is just this, is a vipassana, insight practice, investigating the way things actually are as we experience them here and now. So then ask yourself, who am I? Who are you? And you think of I was given a Christian name. Am I Robert Jackman? Or was I didn't choose that name. My mother and father just told me that's what I am. But that's just an empty phenomenon. It doesn't give me any sense of being anything other than a given name that you use on passports and legal situations. And I changed it when I became a British citizen. So my official name in Britain is Bhikkhu Sumedho. So on the British passport, my name is Bhikkhu Sumedho. So is that who I am, Bhikkhu Sumedho? Am I just changing Robert into Bhikkhu? Am I just playing with words and I can go to a notary and change it again to something else? Am I a name? Am I a physical form? Is this who I really am, this aging old body? I can witness old age. I'm aware of how the body is old and it's packing up. It's not young and virile and healthy anymore. It's just naturally getting ready for the death of this form, because the form is impermanent. That's what it's supposed to do. So if I attach to the body, then old age is really, nobody wants to be old. And, as a person, you identify yourself when you're young. And then, fortunately, I have good health, so I don't suffer a lot physically from any pain or that. Just slowing down. I have to walk carefully, and my sight is not very good. But this is just seeing this is just a natural degeneration of a human body. Should I identify with it? Is it something on a conventional level, I'll be 90 this year, so that's the convention. But that's a conventional thing, only just like Bhikkhu Sumedho is a convention. Robert Jackman is a convention. conventions are sankharas, they're impermanent. And they're not self, they're anatta. Then who am I then if I'm not the body, I'm not the name? Am I really American now when I have British citizenship? And so, you can play around with nationality. Should I just get rid of my American citizenship and become truly a British citizen in every way? Because I'll never really be British, because my whole social, personal conditioning is American. It's the way it is. So it's going through the forms that we tend to cling to and identify with, and you see that they all lead to suffering, to dukkha. That the world itself is the experience of suffering. Now that can sound rather fatalistic. The idea of wanting to make a better world and a progress towards true democratic fairness, justice for all, no kind of racism, sexism, everybody's equal and loves each other, that's ideal, but that's never going to happen because the world is changing. It's not always changing for the better. But what I find is perfect is conscious awareness. This is, and I can't find it as an object because that's what I am. I'm this awareness, this consciousness that's not personal, because to make it personal, I have to identify with it. So even I am the unlimited consciousness is a bit of an exaggeration. The whole sense of who am I am, fades into oblivion. And what's left when there's nothing at all but just pure conscious awareness is peace. And that's where we find our equality, where everything's perfect and fair in perfect peace through awareness, not through the forms. We have to live out our lives with the conditions that we were conditioned by from birth in these human forms. But do you really want to be reborn as another human being? Or as some kind of angelic form, a deva? And a bodhisattva, that sounds very nice for a Buddhist, to be reborn again as a bodhisattva. But what is all that? It's just words. It's still coming from, I want to become something I'm not now. In the next life, I want to become king of the world, or the Maitreya Buddha, or I want to become something that you imagine is perfect, when perfection is always here and now. You don't have to, you can't find it as an object, because you begin through investigating life, contemplating experience as it happens, you begin to see perfection is now, here and now. Whatever the state your body or mind or senses are in, because they're never going to really be perfect. And if they are, if you blessed with really good health and good eyesight and strength and all the best, it's going to change, because that's the way it is. So I encourage you to see, not to despise the world, but to, you begin to understand why the world is the way it is. Why do we fight each other? Why do we brutalize each other? Why do we use power to harm other beings? And why don't we get involved with climate change, try to stop the climate from changing? Why don't we get involved in peace movements, in humanitarian efforts? And these are all noble things to do, not to put them down. But the Buddha actually pointed to the real liberation is through awareness. Because what are you? What are any of us if we have separate consciousnesses? When we get to just letting go of all the conditions that we blindly cling to and identify with, when we let go of everything, what's left is conscious awareness. And I can't find it. It is natural. Because that's what you really are at this present moment, is this pure, conscious, deathless reality. And you begin to realize that for yourself. You begin to take your stand with this position and not just get caught up in all the changing worldly conditions that we, even in Sangha life, in monastic forms, there's always conflicts, personal conflicts and crises arising, because that's the nature of when we're identified with separate forms, they conflict with each other. They can't help it. And because that's the way sankharas are, they're not all the same. We don't always agree and see everything in the way that I might see. Some people have different karmic conditions to live with. So they have disabilities or mental limitations or different problems that they personally have in their condition form. But we live in the world with, when we begin to realize what we share, all sentient beings, what we share, where we're equal, where it's perfect, is already here and now. And then with the world that we live in, we bless it, we do good, refrain from doing harmful things to it, we respect it, but we no longer cling to it, identify with it. So this is what you realize when you take this Buddhist path seriously. Like the word vipassana is now a common word integrated into the English vocabulary. It means insight. Insight, looking inward, not looking for yourself outwardly. how many psychoanalysts, psychiatrists have to deal with people who want to find out who they are? Where do I fit in? Where do I belong in this society, in this world? Why am I like this? Why do I get angry? Why is my sexual tendencies different from others? Why wasn't I born into a wealthy family like other people? Why am I poor? Why am I disabled? It's not fair. And it's not fair. Fairness isn't about the world. The world is basically unfair. And that's not to justify it, but to understand it. But where we can really feel compassion and joy and equanimity is in conscious awareness. And then our actions come from compassion, from loving kindness, from the joy that we experience, because there's a lot of joy in life. But we're not taking it personally or demanding that I personally should have a joyous life or forever, because that's not going to happen. So when we talk about the deathless, that what we identify, what the cause of suffering is always like clinging to death-bound conditions, blindly, habitually grasping conditions that are going to change. And we don't know what we're doing. We can't see what we're doing until we begin to investigate vipassana, looking into the way things are as we begin to be the witness, the conscious witness to the changing world that we experience through the senses. So I offer this as a reflection.